We proudly live in a bilingual country. And companies like Air Canada particularly have a responsibility to always communicate in both official languages, regardless of the situation. I'm very disappointed in, as others are, particularly in these circumstances, a lack of judgment and lack of compassion.
That is Mark Carney, our Prime Minister, earlier this morning when he was asked about the Michael Russo, I don't know what we call it, fiasco. The message he posted, of course, and we talked about this a lot in the afternoon, heard from many of you, in English only. He's being, of course, summoned to a House committee in Ottawa. That ought to be an interesting meeting. Scott Reid is standing by. He's our CTV political analyst, former advisor to Prime Minister Paul Martin, and our feature, of course, brought to you by Guaranteed Industries. We are getting warmer weather. That's the good news. It's finally getting here. So if you want to be prepared, give them a call and get ready for spring and summer. 514-342-3400. They are your air conditioning specialists. Online, guaranteedindustries.com. Scott, I'm going to tell you that we have talked about this since the get-go.
Look, here's the reality. I'm the perfect person to talk to you about this because I'm a unilingual Anglophone from Ontario who had to work in a bilingual environment. I think I was probably the last communications director to the Prime Minister of Canada who did not speak both languages. And, you know, this is the truth of our country. Sometimes there are unwritten rules. Sometimes there are written rules, but sometimes there are unwritten rules under which you must operate. And I know I hear lots of people, you know, they sit around and go, oh, that's ridiculous. It's a private company. Sort of. Only sort of. Right? It was a Crown Corp. It was privatized. The headquarters were kept in Montreal. It has a legal obligation to communicate to customers in both languages. Yes, you're going to get unilingual Anglophone CEOs at some point. We have one now, presumably. But you know what? Like, there's no law that says the Habs coach has to speak French, but everyone knows the Habs coach has to speak French. And if you hired a unilingual Anglophone, it would go bad. And it did with Al McNeil. So I'm just, to me, like, this is almost staff work. This is a judgment issue. This was a predictable and avoidable and therefore inexcusable mistake. And you could have predicted you were going to put yourself in the crosshairs of language politics, particularly when the plane was coming from Montreal, particularly when the pilot who lost his life, one of the two, was a Francophone Quebecer. Like, come on, you know? So either for reasons of politics or practical reasons, because if you wanted to express compassion in the language of the person who actually, one of the people who lost their lives, this is just a mistake that shouldn't happen. He has no choice now. He's going to show up at this committee. He's going to have to eat himself whole. He's going to have to apologize, commit to doing better, and then we'll move on. But for all these people that like bitch and moan and go, oh, it's ridiculous. Why do we have to be led around by, this bilingual fact? Sorry, you have no appreciation of history, no appreciation of practical politics, no appreciation of the context. Air Canada is a Quebec company. That's the reality of it. Canadian company from Quebec. And those are the unwritten reality rules by which you must guide yourself.
Scott, they're calling for his head. The Premier came out today, Francois Legault, and said for all intents and purposes he should resign. We had a couple of, CAC ministers today saying the same thing. Is this a fireable offense?
I don't think it should be, but it could mushroom into that. And I hope that the same misjudgment that led him to say, you know what, I don't feel comfortable enough to express nuance in both languages, doesn't lead him to think that he can tough this out. This thing's rolling. It's rolling in Quebec. It's becoming a political issue. It's, by the way, a matter of political consensus. And people can sit around on bar stools and go, it's all BS. Doesn't matter a darn. Like, reality is what it is. Political reality is pressing upon him. He can't wait to this committee hearing. So he should either ask to be at this committee this week, or he should call a press conference tomorrow and do the obvious thing, whether he likes it or not, whether he wants to or not, whether he thinks it's unfair and severe or not. Stand up, stop this before it does become a question of whether or not he can keep his job and whether or not the board says, my God, we can't take this much heat. We're going to have to cut the guy loose. Just stand up tomorrow and say, it was a terrible misjudgment. It's on me. Here were my reasons, but they're not good enough. I won't do it again. I commit to doing better. And then reasonable people will say good enough.
I will point out, Scott, I don't know whether you know this or not. This first became an issue 4 years ago when he spoke at a Chamber of Commerce meeting here, right?
I remember it.
Remember? That was, at the end of that, I'm sorry, I won't do this again. I promise I'll learn French. It seems none of that, I mean, those were empty words. None of that seems to have taken place since. Why would it make any difference now?
Well, that's going to be a challenge for him. But there's no other path. An apology in full has to be offered. And if there's some hubris that guides him to say, no, I don't need to. Like, I've lived my whole life in politics. Sometimes politics is ephemeral. It's here today, gone tomorrow. Sometimes it's a cast iron wall. And if you want to run into it, be my guest. And this is one of those examples. So he can either deal with this situation in the way he should have when it occurred, or he can watch his time as CEO go up in flames. Like, it will be that the board will cut him loose. Trust me. When there's this level of political consensus around a company that's as political as Air Canada, as culturally sensitive as it is, it must be, his job's on the line. So he has to move. And if he doesn't, well, then it will ultimately be his choice, I guess. But my experience with Quebecers are that not all, but most, will forgive you for trying and will forgive you for acknowledging. Like when I was, and this is 20 years ago, when I was a unilingual Anglophone communications director to a Quebec prime minister, I was genuinely constantly embarrassed and apologizing for the fact that I couldn't converse in both languages. Just the fact that people sincerely recognize that I felt that insufficiency, I expressed that insufficiency, I felt poorly about it, then people would give you a pass. Mm-hmm. But if your attitude is, kiss it, I don't need to care about it, well, then you're going to... And I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying that is his attitude. But he was belligerent about this and doesn't actually do the obvious thing. Then it'll consume him.
I want to ask one question and move on, but I mean, you've worked in as you said, in politics. In crisis management, it seems to me, the first move here should have been an apology. It's a couple of days later now. Why hasn't that happened?
Well, there is one very obvious reason. It's human nature. He doesn't want to. That's the reason.
Okay.
So in the first couple of hours, it might have been a tactical decision saying, I don't know, can we issue an apology? Are we actually just making this issue bigger or not? And there would have been someone standing in the room saying, well, I know nobody wants to hear it, but if we don't issue it, it's actually going to grow larger. You've heard people say this before. The most obvious rule of crisis management, it's what I do for a living, is get to the place where it's going to end up inevitably. Get there first and look like you went there willingly. And if you don't, then the whole thing could go to threads.
Okay. Let me leave it at that. We've talked about this a lot, as I said. I'm sure we're not done. The head of Elections Canada, this is interesting, right? We have a couple of three by-elections, I guess, coming up. The one in Terrebonne, the one that was decided by one vote that they're going to have to hold again. We've now found out the long ballot committee is playing. Now there will be, I think it's 48 candidates going to be in this by-election. Who does that hurt, do you think, the most?
Well, I think it rewards. First of all, I think it's ridiculous. And I know that it's a form of protest, and I know it's legal. But to me, that means the law must be changed. Like, there has to be a remedy to this. It's ridiculous. And not only, now what this means is, and this gets to your question, who does it advantage? You have to write the candidate's name. Right. You can't even write the party name. Most people vote by party, let's be honest. So if we're going to be honest, it probably advantages the incumbent, because who's going to have the highest name recognition in the riding? The incumbent. Who's going to end up with the highest name recognition? The incumbent whose party has pooled the resources so that they can flood the riding with advertising, which is going to help people recognize that name more than the others. So the long ballot committee is actually rewarding the government here. And you explain to me how it is you protest the powers that be by rewarding the incumbent government. Yeah. And I'm not arguing that she should be defeated, but that's a practical consequence of this.
Well, good luck to the people there having to write that in on a ballot, as you said. You know, you're going to start to see a flood of posters, campaign posters, I guess, go up just so people see a name and go, oh, yeah, I recognize that name, and that's who they end up voting for. Kind of sad, to your point. Scott, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Hello, Canada.
This is Bryan Adams Radio. Hosted by Bryan Adams himself.
We'll play a few of mine, a ton of my favorites, and some must-hear behind-the-scenes stories from the world of rock and roll. One thing about doing rock and roll so long is you end up meeting a lot of the people that you admire. Sometimes you even get to work with them.
It's only love, and that's all. Bryan Adams Radio. I'm coming back to you. Now available on the free iHeartRadio app. Everybody